In the autumn of 1930, the British legendary explorer set out on a journey. He will try to become the first European to cross the eerie cliffs and sands. The Arab Julius Cali, which is considered scary by Europeans and not at all hospitable, is known as an empty room covering an area of 250,000 square meters. This empty area in the south of the Arabian Peninsula, stretching along Saudi Arabia, Oman, the United Arab Emirates and Yemen, is well known to travelers that it is the most brutal desert in the world in terms of volume, with dunes 800 meters high, larger than France. If any European thinks he can surpass him, he was probably Bertram Thomas, born in Somerset, England, in exactly 1892. He was sent to Mesopotamia during the First World War. Here he quickly channeled the region and got to know the people of the region, and they paved the way for him to fight on the side of the local forces and even become a senior political advisor to the Sultan of Oman. He knew the area, the situation he was in and how to survive. On October 6, 1930, a caravan of 25 Bedouin guides set out from Salalah on the Oman coast, headed north of the Kara Mountains, 3,000 feet high, to begin their historical enterprise as described later. They reached frankincense gardens, incense forests, and then the great unknown steppe. For the next 59 days Tam was neither seen nor heard from. In fact, his own government was unaware. It was not known where he was or what he was doing. If they had known, he would have been forbidden to attempt. They carried out the mission insidiously. Of course, if things got worse, there wouldn't be a rescue operation either. Finally, on February 5, 1931, Tam's nature reappeared in Qatar, healthy and unharmed. He obtained some frost from the interesting region he reached and was taken from the desert by caravan. During his journey, he brought 400 living specimens, including 21 species new to Western science. These were added to the literature. He had suddenly reached a forest in a dangerous desert and found a refreshing place. He had found these creatures, which were very interesting in his investigations there, but how could this have happened? There was a story told to him by his Bedouin guides. He was aware of the existence of an ancient lost city in the desert, hidden under the sands for generations. Could this be the city of Iram? He could only study the environment in a limited way because he did not have materials to excavate next to it. He had run out of supplies and water and had to return. One of the guides explained it like this. It was a wonderful city that our ancestors had. There is an ancient city rich in treasure, with large armies, and much more beautiful than many lands. Palm groves and a castle of red silver. Now buried under the sands and a few days north of there, Thomas had no time for strenuous work. The breeder had failed to follow the lost city in his attempt to cross the desert. And although he intended to return to continue the chase, he never managed. However, he recorded the story in his seminal book as the native told it to him. The name of the book is Arabia, Felix. He created great excitement among the European people and especially among his own followers. Deck. He was none other than a man who was especially in love with that lost desert city, which lit the fuse of this legend in his book. Lawrence, later known as the Loran of Arabia, wrote to his friends as follows. I am sure that the ancient Arab civilization is in this desert. One day the Arabs told him this. The ruined castles of the son of the great king name were seen by the tribes in the region at different times during the research. There was always this story. In Arabic fairy tales. He even planned to go to the desert and search for the lost city, but he didn't have a chance after he tragically died in a motorcycle accident in 1935. However, before he died, Lawrence used a nickname horse for this mysterious city. It was called the Atlantis of the Sands. This lost city is really waiting to be found. There is a record of an ancient tribe in the Qur'an that has puzzled historians and scientists for a long time. The existence of a region called Iram is indicated. Who they are, what they do, is not described in detail. But there is no detailed explanation in the texts of Judaism or Christianity either. And that's why it's also very curious, and it's also presumed to be Gomara. The Abrahamic religions are based on almost the same history and therefore mention the same tribes and events many times. Think about the Prophet Solomon. Like Moses and the Pharaoh of Egypt, Nuh, the deluge incident. All of them have been included in the holy books with minor differences, but the most remarkable one is mentioned in the Qur'an. Have you not seen what your Lord did to the people of the horse when the Prophet Muhammad warned those who did not believe? To Iram, which is full of tall buildings, which had not been created decently like him among the towns. Surah 6, 7, 8. Many scientists have been interested in this topic. They could not find anything about them anywhere in the other sacred books. What happened to the horse people? Did this interesting and strange architecture that was made for the whole country really exist, and what happened to them if they really built something? To this third question, the Noble Quran gives an extraordinary answer. According to the Quran, the city of Iram was a region inhabited by the Ad people, who later existed in the Arabian Peninsula. After the flood of Noah, they founded a powerful kingdom there using their great wealth and built monuments in every high place. And they were not afraid to build palaces, as if they would live forever. They established power over their neighbors. As stated in the Quran, they brutally killed many people on the peninsula and conquered them mercilessly. As the Noble Quran says about the people of the horse, when you hold it like merciless tyrants. Surat al-Shu'ara is the 130th verse, but this tremendous power had given way to arrogance. It was strange that the people of Iram were idolaters and evil. Here are the lower people, that was it. They rejected the signs of their Lord knowingly and disobeyed his messengers. They obeyed the order of the tyrant who took over and went after him. Surah Hud is the 59th verse. For this reason, Allah sent the prophet Qutbah to warn the people of Iram so that they would give up their evil ways. But the people of Iram were not intimidated. Allah sent a terrible drought during the heyday of Iram. Hazrat Hud begged the people of Ad, but they still did not want to listen. The people of Ad saw that a cloud formation was approaching. It was a dense cluster of clouds approaching their valley, and at last they believed it. The rains had come. They thought they were saved. How wrong they were. When they saw the punishment as a cloud spreading towards their turn, they said, "This is a widespread cloud that will rain down on us. Hutsa, he is what you want to come in a hurry. It is a wind in which there is a painful punishment." The 24th verse of Surat al-Ahkaf was not the rain brought by these clouds. It was a sandstorm. And the result was disastrous. As described in the Noble Quran, Allah caused that storm to haunt them for 7 nights and 8 days, so that you would have seen those people laid down like hollow palm logs. The 7th verse of Surat al-Haqqah. And so his story ends. The people of Ad in the city of Iram. He was swept away by a sandstorm. It was a not very veiled threat against turning away from God, meant as an allegory, as if this story had never existed, whether it was just a rhetorical device or not. The question of whether the remains of an ancient time really existed is still being wondered and researched by many scientists. Although the strangeness of the city of Iram may not be found in other Abrahamic traditions, the Quran has informed us. Further, some researchers have taken important steps on this topic in the 9th century. A copy of a work that would become one of the world's most popular and decadent books in Christian literature was being put together in Syria. He had settled on Persian culture, that is, he would bring together decrepit myths and folk tales of Iran at an extraordinary valuation. This is known as the Tales of the 1001 Nights. The basic premise of the book was simple. Let's give an example. The vipers executed him for deceptively disloyalty between the kingdoms, and then he married a series of virgins. But the morning after the marriage, he also had them executed without giving them a chance to be unfaithful. Finally, the king married a woman named Scheherazade, who started telling him something the night she remarried, and frees the city, starts telling the king a story. He prolongs it and prolongs it because he knows about the incident. He'll finish it eventually. Then he immediately starts another one. This happens again every night. In the end, the king decides to spare her life and they both live happily ever after. In fact, each of the stories he tells represents an ancient Persian text until 1001 Nights later. After its initial creation in the 9th century, the compilation of the book grew and expanded over the years depending on the religious and political climate of the time. In the 9th, 10th and 13th centuries, stories from Egypt, Syria and Iraq were added. The myths and stories of the Middle East that have been going on for centuries have become a kind of living history in the form of books. A book finally appeared in Europe in 1704. French, German, English, Italian, Dutch, Danish, and after its popularity exploded it was translated into German, Italian, Dutch, Danish and Russian from the 18th century until today. It has remained in print all over the world and is still helping to shape our understanding of modern history. There is a story that deserves special attention in 1001 Nights, the story of a man named Abdullah bin Khaliba. Ali Khaliba goes to the desert to look for his lost camel and discovers a wonderful desert city. He describes it like this. I discovered an incredibly deserted city, got off my single organized camel and entered the city calming my mind. When I arrived at the castle, I found that it had 2 large gates, which were 2 huge doors that had never been seen in the world. All the jewels and hyacinths are in their whiteness, red, yellow and green. When I saw this, I was stunned with great admiration. After thinking that this amazing event was very wonderful, I entered the castle in fear and was stunned with amazement. Long, wide and very high palaces were built, all made of gold and silver, with many colorful jewels next to them. There were mansions, magnificently decorated gates, walls, gardens. Pearls were scattered everywhere. When I came to the heart of the city, and there I did not see such a creature created from the children of Adam. I was about to faint and die from fear. I also looked down from below. The roofs and balconies of the pavilion rooms were flowing under them and rivers were flowing down the main streets. The trees were loaded with fruit. The roofs were of silver. That's why I said to myself that undoubtedly this is the promised paradise for the future world. Returning from the lost city, Abdullah immediately told the local government officials everything that had happened, describing in detail the incredible things he had seen and even showing them some of the Ms. Amber and saffron pearls and balls. The authorities were amazed by the story, but sent a skeptical man there as an expert, and the answer came immediately. O Emir of the believers, this colonnade is the city of Iram. Fancy and bright. The like has never been done in this land. It is his son Shaddad who does it, and then the man rejoices. Abdullah and the officials tell the story of the powerful King Shaddad. King Shaddad ruled alone in the pillared city of Iram. He liked to read ancient books. He loved the descriptions of the future world and heaven that he had read in books, and his soul led him to build pavilions, columns, trees and similar ones with their fruits. He had 100 kings under his hand. The king reigned over 100,000 chieftains, each of whom commanded each the king I see a dream of heaven, which is mentioned in the old books and annals to everyone. And he said, I want to build. Together with the army of King Shaddad, instead of his desire he set out, glad to be brought. Then all his power, which destroyed him and all the stubborn disbelievers with him, came like a mighty thundering sound from the heavens. He was lost forever in the Arabian sands. When read closely, it seems that the story of Abdullah bin Ali Khaliba is both confirmed and expanded. Did the city of Iram and the people of Ad really exist in the Quran? Is it a lost city right now? A lost city buried under the sands of the Arabian desert is still a paradise of unimaginable wealth. For centuries, many scientists thought that this legendary lost city was only a product of religious allegory and fantasy fiction. Perhaps it was not until the 1970s, 1964, when everything changed, that an archaeologist named Paolo Mattia from the University of Rome started a mission to a region called Mardin in northern Syria around 35. For the first few years, miles southwest of Aleppo, Mattia and her team found very little on the pitch. For a few scattered fragments that encouraged them to continue digging, an important invention was finally realized in 1968. They uncovered a statue dedicated to the goddess Ishtar. It bore an ancient inscription. This was a striking discovery. It was the name of a city mentioned in the texts of the Sumerians, Akkadians and ancient Egyptians. But until now it had never been discovered in modern times. Mattia and his team, recognizing its importance, gradually continued to excavate the site. Countless temple walls, gates and other impressive buildings that once made up the city of Ebla would be removed from here, respectively. In 1974, Mattia and his team discovered 42 tablets, and it turned out that they were part of an ancient kind of palace archive. It became clear that this was just the beginning. There were thousands of clay tablets under the ground, neatly stored on shelves that collapsed in a fire. The fire that seemed to have destroyed the palace seemed to have somehow suppressed, stopped and remained under the ground. This fire was a great chance for archaeologists and historians, as it officially preserved the clay tablets as if they were in a furnace, and there were even clay catalog labels on the tablets for identification. Archaeologists have uncovered about 17,000 tablets and fragments containing a lot of information. At that time, Ebla had served as a bottomless treasure trove of information about the city and its surroundings. The tablets provided detailed information about Ebla's neighbors and business partners. It also provided behind-the-scenes historical information about these places at that time, including Damascus, Gaza, Babylon, Lebanon and the Canaanites. It was one of the most important discoveries of the 20th century. As a result of these investigations, there was an important information about an Iranian city among the places and business partners that caught the eyes of archaeologists, deciphering a place written on tablets as the legendary City of Towers. It seemed to confirm that it was the city of Iram. In the Qur'an, it was said that the poles were high. In the stories of the great palaces and the 1001 Nights, these features actually existed at some point. Even the tablets describe the Iranian city. He described Karabukh as a place of idolatry and idolatry. In both books he seemed to endorse his supposedly evil ways. Archaeologists have found concrete evidence of Iram for the first time after denying its existence for so long. Here's the question. If there is evidence that Iram exists, where is she now and what happened to her? And could it really be buried under the sand? Ebla was once a lost city, and now it has been found. Can we do the same thing in the city of Iram? We can keep asking questions non-stop. But you should also state your thoughts in your comments, friends. In 1948, Oman Petroleum Development Limited Company, a geological group, was conducting research in a wide area. As the desolate expats of this empty region in the country's eastern Fair province approached the ancient oasis of Shezar, they encountered something very interesting. As they approached what they initially believed to be a large white cliff, they realized that it was not a cliff. It was the walls of a ruined castle sitting on a January-like cave, the area around this castle descending into the darkness of the world, and the gaps were completely closed. Although geologists wondered whether this region had a population in history and when it was standing, they did not ask any more questions about this castle, as they were mostly interested in getting water from the ancient well of Shizar to use on their arduous journey through the desert. But he had taken his own notes, having been on his own journey through this empty region from 1930 to 1931. Later, while returning with his guides, he was informed that this castle was built by something local only a few centuries ago. But was this castle really only a few hundred years old? Or was it much more? This question is a mystery that has not been solved for more than 40 years. Nicholas Clubb was a writer, filmmaker and amateur archaeologist. A crazy idea of his own in the early 1990s changed the game of archaeology forever. After reading Bertrand Thomas's Felix of Arabia, the idea of a lost city under the Arabian sands developed his imagination when he reached adulthood and made him turn to this event. He was going to go back to the area, find where Tams couldn't find, and solve this, but his method was going to be completely different. He describes it like this. I called NASA's laboratories in Pasadena, California. It's a place famous for satellite radars. He told the scientists who answered the phone that he had an idea and that their radars should be used. He said, if a city was buried in the desert, could you see it with this radar? In the sequel, he also tried to convince the scientists at NASA that he was not only a madman, but also that they actually agreed to a blank scan in order to take his ideas seriously and try them out. By comparing the images recorded during the next mixed radar flights using an image obtained on a flight in 1984 with a special radar system that can see into the sand and select subsurface geological features, scientists realized something surprising. In front of the empty zone there was an extensive ancient trade network. And it stretched throughout the region. Face. Artificial paths created by thousands of traveling camels are now under the sand. He had obtained the images in a disguised way. Trade routes of the sands. It was clear that it revealed the existence of a city that had been lost beneath. The roads were like the old population center, trade centers. Actually more. When you look closely, you realize that many of these ancient roads converge in the same place. He did. This was the oasis of Shizer, and an American archaeologist named Curas Ziras. And together with an English cashier Sereno, they went to the region to find it. Team. As soon as he started digging, he immediately realized what was going on. What they discovered. The castle of the thing was only a few hundred years old, it was true. The castle is just a few. It was a century. And built on the rubble of something much older than itself. It was done. When they started digging, in a short time a large ancient settlement. They began to uncover his remains. The center of this ancient settlement. He was about 5,000 years old. And it was a really amazing place. There. Large and imposing, 8 of them, each about 10 to 12 feet high. Surrounded by a wall, the permanent fortress and 60 feet long at each corner of the fortress. There was a huge tower about 10 feet in diameter. Like a royal. It seemed. A merger storage facility for the ancient city and an ancient. The trade center had a record-keeping center for archaeologists to study. They knew there was more to it than they discovered as they went along. 1. It seemed as if the city had been built from this once thriving settlement. And this city was once prosperous. Continuous limestone for structures. Because it was used, it eventually caused the city to collapse due to its weight. Archaeologists believe that the parts of the city that disappeared in this sinkhole are probably. They had to accept that he was lost forever if they could, what other mysteries could be revealed to us? It's enough to leave you wondering about it. A strong one with imposing towers. The ancient economic center is beyond what it should be and by an event. It was destroyed somehow and buried under the sand. Only one meaning for it could come at last, and he thought he had found the lost city of Iram. In the sequel, Rinaltini's has been for a long time. In 1992 he agreed to write a book about this ongoing mystery, wrote and he published it. The title of the book was The Atlantis of the Sands. This could really have happened. Is it? I have found the long-lost city of Iram. If so, what other main unloaded treasures of this mighty city of times it may be standing deep down? What other ancient mysteries can be solved, or even the topic of what it may turn out is personally intriguing? Maybe they are still in the sacred books, in the tales of the 1001 Nights, and the people. He may be waiting for it in his stories. What do you say?